technology is different than wealth management,
Right.
which is different than construction, which is different than manufacturing. What people don't appreciate is they gravitate towards the financials because that's kind of what everyone thinks first blush.
the
Hey,
easy
what's the
part.
multiple?
Right.
Boom. The reality is, if you want to get the value that most people view, you got to have all the other stuff.
Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Doug Hudson.
I'm Scott Wood.
And if you're joining us, watching us or listening us, welcome to Decision Points. And welcome, George Coultress.
Thank
How
you
we
for having
doing?
me. Great.
Yeah? Heard
Happy
you had a
to be
nice
here.
drive over here.
Only an hour and 20 minutes all the way from Fort Worth, Texas.
Did it take you an hour and 20 today?
It took me an hour and 20 today.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, which usually is not the case, but for whatever reason, no wrecks, just traffic.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
It's a busy place, DFW.
so you prefer Fort Worth?
Let me give a little introduction to George. George, you're the managing director at Western Commerce Group. We'll dig into that. A merchant bank located in Fort Worth, Texas, the wild side of the DFW.
That's right.
Focusing on M&A advisory, direct private equity investing, and wealth management for high net worth individuals. Does that sound like what you do?
Sounds like what I do.
All right. You've represented both buyers and sellers, which is super intriguing. I know we're going to get a lot into today within a variety of industries, including industrial services and distribution, oil field services, telecom, energy, utility infrastructure, manufacturing, emergency restoration, healthcare, food and beverage, and it says many other because
I
what
was
did we
gonna
leave
say,
off?
what have you not done?
Basically, I tell people I don't do commercial real estate and I don't do E&P, which in Fort Worth, Texas, I mean, a lot of people are doing downhole drilling, looking for the commodity. I'm not doing that. There's
Gotcha.
plenty other smarter people that know commercial real estate and E&P.
Long story short, you are the perfect guy to teach us which levers you can pull to maximize the value of your business.
That's right.
George, welcome to Decision Points.
Thanks, guys, for having me.
Man, if you're a business owner, there's not a better person to talk to than George, I don't think.
That's right. That's right. And, you know, one of the things we'll learn over the course of the hour is George loves to talk. So he's, which he'll.
Well, he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
I normally get that kind of heat quick out the gates, but I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, no, happy to be here, like I said. And this will be fun for me, guys. I mean, I enjoy talking about this stuff. I get to do it every day, get to meet different business owners, see their businesses, talk about it. So I think this will be a fun conversation for us.
One of the things I appreciate is George brings a ton of energy
100%.
to this conversation. And so we're going to have some fun.
Yeah.
Clearly you bring some boots. So tell me about your boots.
So this was actually a gift.
Of course.
So one of the
Letty's?
first business, Letty's in Fort Worth.
right.
So if everyone's ever looking for great
ML
boots.
Letty's, send us a check.
That's
because
right.
He probably just sold you 10 boots.
I mean,
Go
I
ahead.
got 4 pairs of them. They make me taller. That's the reason I got them, but they're fantastic. And what's great about them is they're almost a conversation starter every time. And for a lot of the business owners we transact with and we do business with, look, we have people who wear suits and ties every day. We have people who are in industrial construction and they wear boots every day. All those people have a business that need to figure out what to do and how to do it. It doesn't matter what you do or how you grew up. They're all businesses, right? So it's just funny you notice that because, look, I'd make the joke I do it because makes me taller, but the reality is I've enjoyed getting to wear them, and it's a good piece for just how to get a conversation going.
They're gorgeous.
Thank you.
Alligator?
Alligator.
Alligator. You got to be honest. Like, this microphone will blow up if you're not honest. How do you feel about a couple of Dallas guys with no socks on?
Well, considering I used to live in Dallas for 5 years,
Okay.
doing investment banking,
Felt like 20?
it kind of brings back some memories. I mean, honestly.
Did you ever rock this or not?
I did. I mean, I typically had the socks going, but I mean,
Well, it is going to be 105 outside today. I
and
think
typically I don't wear a sport coat when it's over 100, but I
you
figured
dressed
for
up for
you
us.
guys,
You dressed
No, we
up for
and for the
appreciate it.
Decision
audience, I
Points.
figured, hey, why not
We
make it look
appreciate
okay?
it.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. But it does look good on you
He's
too.
going to get in his car. He's going to call this guy named Chris Pate, who manages our Fort Worth office for True North, and say, these Dallas guys, both Scott and Doug, were not wearing socks.
I'm telling you.
You're going to do that.
Just so you know, I have a pair of similar shoes in my closet,
All right,
just in
all
case
right.
I ever
Thank
come
you.
back to that.
Thank
You're
you for the
welcome.
affirmation.
That's
Appreciate
Where are you
that.
from?
So I'm from Austin, Texas.
Okay, heard of it.
Born in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Lived in McAllen. Moved to Austin when I was in kindergarten, and then basically first grade, and went my entire life of elementary school, middle school, high school in Northwest Austin. I went to Westwood High School. So
You moved. Your family moved. Where were you born?
So I was born in San Antonio.
Born in San Antonio.
Dad. So interesting story. Just My dad worked for Southwestern Bell.
Okay,
you know, and that generation, you stay in the same company for 20, 30 years.
100%.
You retire that way. My mom was a school teacher, actually on the
in
Bolling.
McAllen or
all throughout her career.
Okay,
so in San Antonio, then McAllen, then ultimately Austin, taught on the bilingual side of the education system. But given the AT&T structure, when they bought, you know, the regional bells and all that, and they kind of combined them, my dad moved from San Antonio to McAllen, where we lived in the Valley and had some family down there, and then ultimately to Austin, where he managed a call center there. So
no way.
It's fun for me to be in this type of role and see these types of businesses, because I didn't necessarily grow up talking about business or talking about finances, right? So this is really neat for me to see. I mean, obviously they taught me hard work and ethic and what to do and how to do it and right from wrong, but this was fun for me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you didn't talk business, and maybe a lot of families didn't. My dad was an entrepreneur, but I don't remember too many conversations. Siblings?
2 older sisters. So I'm the youngest. And I mean, there's pretty good distance. My middle sister's 5.5 years older than me. My oldest sister's almost 10 years older than me. So, I mean, there's some pretty good distance between us.
Your siblings must have, it took your mom and dad like 5 years to recover from each kid.
That's why. And hey, they went to every sport.
And you ended the deal.
Oh, yeah, of course, because I mean, you know, you got to save the best for last, right? They would argue that.
Yeah.
They would absolutely argue that. But no, it was great. And so grew up in Austin. Interestingly enough, found my way to TCU through one of my best friends.
Okay,
he was going to be a walk-on there. And so for me, my whole family's UT. Everyone stayed in Austin, grew up burnt orange.
And once again, listeners, I have to remind, that's not the University of Tennessee.
That's correct.
See, you got to get outside of Texas to realize that there is another UT out there. Knoxville fans,
that's right.
Forgive us.
So found my way to TCU. Funny enough, I started as a kinesiology major. At the time for me, you know, high school kid, sports, football, powerlifting, all that is kind of what I knew. So I went to TCU to think of being a strength and conditioning coach. That's kind of what I wanted to do at the time. As you get to TCU, for me anyway, you know, I join a fraternity, I meet some guys. The people at TCU had some business backgrounds, right? For me, it was kind of an eye-opening experience. A lot of people are in the business school, great business school, finance, accounting, all this stuff. So I go home one semester before my senior year, or excuse me, my second semester freshman year, and I asked my dad, I said, hey, I'm like the only one in kinesiology. Everyone else is in business. And he said to me, and he goes, look, you can do whatever you want. If you're a strength conditioning coach, you probably move around small towns, great gig.
Yep.
You probably have better optionality within business. And at the time, we couldn't even talk about marketing versus finance versus accounting. I mean, we just do it as business.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, no problem. So ultimately, I switched to the business school, and that was probably for me the best decision I made, because it kind of changed the trajectory of what I was going to do. I mean, I did not go into college thinking I was going to do
second semester freshman year.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and I was lucky enough. I came in with a bunch of high school credits. I was able to place out and pick up 2 majors to stay the 4 years.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I chose finance and entrepreneurial management, knowing for me, kind of like numbers, but I also kind of liked people. Those seemed, and I hated accounting at the time, which is funny because we do a ton of it today.
Yeah.
That just seemed like the best thing to do at the time. And frankly, it was. In hindsight, it was kind of course changing for me.
Do you remember, sorry to interrupt, do you remember much about your entrepreneurial management track at TCU?
A little bit. It was way more esoteric in nature than obviously the finance side, right? So that's what was interesting for me, is I felt like I got both almost vantage points of, hey, you have finance and accounting, here's the numbers, here's the language of business, here's how you need to read it and understand money and how that works. And then entrepreneurial management was like, hey, here's how people think, here's the risk profile, here's organizational management, here's how emotionally people might react to certain decision points. And I tell people all the time, 17 years later, it's almost like I should have been in psychology, because when you blend those two together, and we're going to talk about it today, I mean, it's as much psychology and emotions as it is economics, EBITDA, tax, legal, whatever else. So
I would say on your side of the business, and probably obviously in wealth management, it's 80% psychology,
all day,
managing emotions and all those kind of things. Couple quick family questions. Your mom and dad still with us?
Still with us.
Yeah.
Thank God. Yep.
Your dad reminds me already, and never even met him, you were going to finish in 4 years, whether you wanted to or not, right?
When I told him I was supposed to finish in 3, and he said, well, you better figure out the last one. So I was blessed enough to get some scholarships and grants and do those things through some coursework, but it worked out. Big TCU proponent, obviously. We lived in Fort Worth while I was at school, moved to Dallas. So that's what I'm saying. So I actually left. So I got in the finance track, did some things at TCU to help elevate me on the finance world, did some honors programs. And at the time, they pushed investment banking. And this is interesting.
TCU
I tell people,
pushed investment banking.
TCU did, because they did not have a
Interesting.
big funnel for investment banking at the time. Mind you, this is 2004 going into 2008. So originally I'm supposed to go to Bear Stearns. Well, 2008 happens. And then they say, well, guess what, guys? That's not happening.
That's not happening.
You were going back to the fitness world.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. And so, but here's what's best is I started interning with Western, where I'm at today as a sophomore.
Yeah, very cool.
Because I had a family connection of my fraternity brother, whose brother had a distinct connection of doing business with Western. And we'll talk about Western some more later, but like great community of people who didn't find it in a traditional pattern. And so it's this amalgamation of people with different skill sets to go out and do what we're doing today. Perfect. So I do that, work my way through college, ultimately find my way in Dallas, and then 5 years later come back to Western and elevate from there.
So you interned at Western during college.
Correct.
Came over here, got your first job here. We can talk about who that was with and what you were doing, but and then ended up going back to Western eventually.
Correct.
Why do you think early on you wanted to be strength and fitness career?
You know, it's a great question. I would tell you, for me, it's what I knew, right? I knew sports, I knew discipline, I knew getting in front of people.
But you connected for some reason to the strength and fitness and the health of it.
That's right. I enjoyed
I
that
played sports
piece of
too.
it.
I never even considered that as even a profession.
Yeah, I think for me, when you bifurcate football and powerlifting, which were the two biggest sports for me.
How'd you get into powerlifting?
I was small and strong for my weight.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, that's how I got in. The coaches pushed me. I excelled at it.
Yeah.
And just found it as another outlet.
Driven, so.
It's weight class driven,
Absolutely.
so even the playing field, so to speak.
So pound for pound, I could compete.
Yeah.
It didn't matter with who, but pound for pound, I could compete. So what that gave me was a mindset to figure out, okay, I can excel here. I love this team aspect. This is kind of an individual aspect.
Yep.
How do I blend those two together?
Yeah.
For me at the time, strength conditioning was how to get to peak performance while also helping and kind of socializing with people. That's what I thought of. And I don't know, maybe you could draw some similarities to what I do today in helping business owners figure out how to get to where they want to get to. You kind of start with the end in mind and work and evolve. Could be 2 years, could be a month, could be 6 years. Doesn't matter.
I hope you picked up on that. I mean, it's certainly a phrase I wish I had heard sooner in my business, build with the end in mind.
Sure.
I would imagine that's a big part of how you all coach people. So you graduate TCU. Tell us about that early career. You moved to Dallas and took a job. What was that like?
Yep.
Who was it with?
So what's funny, so I graduate 2008, financial crisis is going on. So not the best time to get into investment banking, naturally. In Dallas, at that point, there was a bunch of middle market investment banks, bulge brackets, that were no longer here. They were getting out of the market. 2008's going on, right?
Yep.
So I found an opportunity to go to a company called Southwest Securities, which is now Hilltop Securities. And
you know them?
And go into their corporate finance group. So it was a small group. A bunch of MDs had come over. They were revamping the group at the time. And so for me, again, almost just coincidental and or a blessing of they were revamping the group. And so I got exposure to how other bulge bracket people did it because they were trying to recreate that here at Southwest Securities. So I start there 2008, ultimately stay there till 2012. Worked with a great bunch of guys who had done it at other places, Lazard, Citi, Goldman, you name it. They had been there and kind of brought that discipline skill set. As you can appreciate, going to investment banking, I knew what I was getting into, but that was very much your 100-hour weeks, you're grinding. You know, I'm living in Uptown as an early 22-year-old. It was fantastic, but you're working till midnight, 1 a.m., maybe go out for an hour or two, come back, do it all over again. But it taught me what to do and how to do it, and how to break down businesses and understand different industries. It was fantastic. It was a great learning experience, and I knew what I was getting into.
Do you think, does that culture still exist? Are recent grads working 100 hours a week now,
I think it
currently?
depends where you go. I mean, I think there's a lot of people focused on not doing that.
Yep.
I think like you go to Western and we're pretty specific about not creating that. There's no need. In some places, maybe there's a need, ebb and flow with the deal cycle, but I feel like more people are getting away from that. Or at least they don't talk about it as much.
Work-life balance culture is a huge part of, I think it's rightly driven. I was just curious from your perspective if that's even happening anymore.
And I think it changes as you evolve in your career, right?
Yeah.
At 37 is much different than at 22. My responsibilities are different. My desires are different. My passions are different.
Dude, does he look 37?
No.
What would you have guessed?
Honestly?
Yeah.
because I know a little bit about your career, it's the first time we've met, I would have said 30.
Okay.
But you're going to be fine at 70 or 80.
That's what I was going to say. The good news is when you're about 65, like you're going to look 55, and it's all.
And that's our oldest daughter. Everybody's thought she's 10 years younger, which she hates. Like 27, she still gets. Can I see your, ID? Everybody thinks she's 12. We're like, just wait till you're 60s. Like, no, that's a long time.
It's going to be a good thing.
I got carded at Rated R movies for the longest time because, like, are you 18? Can you even see this? I'm like, this is embarrassing as I'm going on a date here. Like, what are we doing here, guys?
Yeah.
We named the podcast Decision Points, and so I want to backtrack a little bit, but then have you catch us up.
Sure.
What's a key decision point, George, in your journey, say, prior to 18? So it might be third grade, it might have been a junior high school. What's a key decision point? Kind of walk us through that story. And then what's maybe a key decision point in that first 5 to 7 years of your career?
Sure. So for me, and this is just kind of getting real with us as we're talking about how I got to where I got to.
Love it.
So I went to TCU to get away from Austin. Okay. At the time, I didn't know anybody going to TCU. And for whatever reason, it felt right. My parents were going through a divorce. I had all that going on. So I wanted to kind of get away and find something new. Best decision I ever made was to go to TCU. The school was awesome, but it gave me, I found my wife there. So if she ever listens to this, best decision ever.
Absolutely. Right? There you go.
But
What's her name?
Katie.
Katie, how long y'all been married?
We're going on 12 years.
All right, congrats.
12 years, thank you. So that created then a network of people, of business environment, but also friendships that are still there today. And for me, that was the fraternity that I joined. It could be a fraternity, it could be a group of people. It doesn't matter. But
you found a community.
I found a community.
Yep.
And that opened my eyes to things I hadn't seen before. So as I look back, I'm sure there's kind of micro decision points along the way as I kind of evolved. But for me, I look back at the decision trees all the time and I think, man, by doing that, totally changed the trajectory for me. And I think about that all the time. All the time. And then, so fast forward 5 years, choosing this profession was happenstance.
Interesting.
The reason I got an internship was because I wanted to live here in the summer with my buddy because he was our rush chair. And my parents like, well, you need an internship. You got to pay for your rent. You got to do all this. Okay, no problem. And mind you, my mom was a teacher. My dad, managed a call center at Southwest Mountain Marketing, some other stuff. But it's not like I had the freedoms just to do whatever I wanted. Right. So I had to learn how to kind of figure it out. So I get this internship and I find myself in M&A. And I wasn't even finance accounting yet. I didn't even know what that was. And I found that I liked solving problems. I found that I liked talking with people, creating a trust and helping people get to ultimately where they might not be able to get to themselves. And because we deal with middle market business owners, we're not dealing with private equity groups who own other businesses. We're not dealing with large public companies selling other. This is a very emotional and transformational
100%.
event.
You're first generation business owner.
Yeah. Or it could be fourth generation.
Yeah, well said. But it stayed in the family.
100%. And for them to do this, I'm telling you, it's as complicated and as emotional as everything I've ever done, but it's the most rewarding outside of family and personal things for them to get to that point, realize and take a breath and have the successes, whether they sell 100% or roll over, and we can talk about all that. It's pretty amazing.
Yep.
Well, it's one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is because we want to, over the course of many episodes, delve into the emotional aspect. And, for an entrepreneur, it's their life work.
Absolutely.
Right? It's their life work manifested in something that's very tangible. And then they go sell it. And then it's like, okay, now what?
Absolutely.
Now what? Right.
100%.
And so there's this tremendous tension around the sale. It's both exciting and scary at the same time.
And we have to emotionally talk with that with our clients and prospects every day. It is not as binary as, hey, I'm ready to sell. Let's go get the most money. In fact, when we get that comment, we're like, hold on. Red flag.
Have you really thought this through?
Correct. Because what business owners don't appreciate, and Scott knows this well, it's great to get the liquidity event, but depending on what that structure looks like and what that partner looks like, it's a very different position in life. It's almost like I equate it to with kids, and I've not done this yet, going to empty nesting. But you think about similarities. It's just a different psychology point in your life. So you have to appreciate that. So we talk to business owners all the time. Where are you mentally? What does this mean? And Doug, you'll appreciate this given the age comment. I've had the question all the time that I got to work through is, George, I've owned this business longer than you've been alive.
And you say, well, I'm not as young as I look.
Correct. And I got to work through that. And then we immediately get to the deal and they're like, perfect.
And then you say, I hope, but I've helped 100 business owners sell, and you've never sold your business before.
All day.
So you have more reps and you're less emotional. Want to back up one step. Kiddos?
2 girls.
Yeah.
I have a 7-year-old named Annabelle who's in 2nd grade, and then a 2.5-year-old named Violet who just started Mother's Day out for 3 days a week, and my wife is ecstatic. She started yesterday.
I bet she is. So let's go back to Western, your internship, and was there like a specific light bulb moment during your internship where you were like, this is what I want to do? Mm-hmm. Or was it just sort of...
I'm going to give you the real answer.
Got there
I'm
over
going to give you the raw answer.
BS.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the raw answer because, again, given kind of how I grew up and the situation I was in, I had a bunch of school debt.
Yeah.
I had scholarships and grants to offset it, but I had school debt.
Yeah,
for sure.
And, you know, I say today that people should teach kids about taxes and debt and what that means. I'm thankful I didn't know because I probably wouldn't have gone to TCU if I would have known that.
Yeah.
But I tell you that because at the time they're pushing investment banking, and boy, at 22, it's a great lifestyle, even though you're working a lot economically, super successful.
Yep.
So I'm over here thinking, well, that makes
That's
sense. I need that.
That's
to
where
pay
I'm going.
off
That's
that.
right.
Yep.
And I mean, I wish it was more kind of, you know, I had this, you know, mindset and I knew what I was going to do. That was the trigger point for me. And then I just started digging in and started realizing it, and then realized, okay, I'm picking this up pretty good. I understand business a little bit, and it just got better and better. And I had great teachers, great people to work with who invested in me and taught me. And then ultimately decided I want to do this. And then I look up and 17 years, I'm still here.
It's not, you know, it's not a bad thing to have gotten there that way.
That's right.
I mean, I've, you know, similar story. We won't go into it today, but I kind of found wealth management the same way, which was, I know I can make a pretty good living. I can provide for my family. I can, you know, there's a pathway to have 100%. Some financial success. Maybe not the purest motive in the world initially, but you know, it sort of opened my eyes to what's possible.
Yeah, if it's any consolation prize, that motive has turned into a pure motive, right? To help and to figure out.
Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate both your all's honesty. I mean, we got to get real in all of this. I mean, we have to provide a living, and especially you were wise enough to realize you needed a course to pay back debt. And so this was a path to get there. And so as you're listening and watching, I think the other thing too, sometimes in podcasts and presentations, we do spin it too positively. What connects with me, and I think what connects most, tell me, how'd you really get there? And I love Drew, and our CIO, mentioned in one of our podcasts, I know, often we're just lucky in the distribution that we get. So you transitioned back to Fort Worth and Western, and just as you started, George, at the beginning of this, build your business with the end in mind, I want to ask the question that I think every business owner, they got 2 minutes with you. I mean, that's it. And they're going to ask you, I meet you over a cocktail, but it's quick, it's fast. Why should I sell my business? What should I be thinking about?
Perfect. And before I answer that 2 minutes, just help me understand, give me the vintage of this business owner. Closer to me or closer to you?
What does he mean by vintage?
Vintage, yeah.
Did he just asked me how old I was?
That's a good word.
Yeah. Is this gray or is this white? Don't answer the question. I know what it is. It's white. It's not gray.
Silver.
I think it's a great question because it insinuates, which is correct, what is the life cycle that I'm in. I'm 57. Let's assume this person's 45, because mostly 45, you probably feel like you're in the prime. You're maybe still bulletproof a little bit.
Sure.
So I'm 45. You got 2 minutes with me. Why?
Yeah. And to start, it's because I would tell them, not every business is the same. Not every transaction is the same. And ultimately, it starts with the owners, their family, and the employees. And what is that business owner trying to get at? So the question for 2 minutes is, what do you want out of this? If you're just seeking liquidity, that looks one way. If you're seeking a rollover and you want a new partner because you've kind of hit this plateau and boy, I still have that desire to create, that looks another way. If maybe you just don't have the succession plan because it's a family-owned business and you don't have the children underneath you or whatever, that looks a whole nother way. We start there, and then from there we kind of dig into the business, of which then, though every business is different, Doug.
100%.
I mean, technology is different than wealth management,
Right.
which is different than construction, which is different than manufacturing. So then we start breaking down the businesses to tell them, okay, ultimately to get to where you want to do, here are the different levers to push and pull economically, qualitatively, from a hiring perspective, transition perspective, succession perspective. I mean, there's a whole host of things.
Yep.
If anyone tells you it's cookie cutter, I'm out, because it's just not. I mean, anything you do in your life is not necessarily cookie cutter. When it comes to this, that's what it's at. And that's what they need to think about.
You know, and I appreciate about that, George, is you started with a question back to me, to me, the business owner, because you've got to evaluate the why.
There wasn't, hey, here are the 3 things you've got to do. It's like,
what are you trying to accomplish?
Yes. And what I also appreciate about what George said is, you know, we have our 4 pillars for pre-transaction planning.
What are they?
So they're, you know, basically a coaching, they're 2 personal, 2 professional, or 2 personal, 2 business. Coaching on the personal side, wealth planning on the personal side, and then you refer to it kind of as management, organization, administration on the business side, and then really valuation on the business side. And you kind of hit all of those in your description.
And of course, most everybody thinks of valuation immediately.
Yes, that's where everybody goes to is, okay, I want to max my valuation, but you know, in order to have a great exit, and the statistic is that we quote often from the Exit Planning Institute is 75% of all business owners profoundly regret exiting within 12 to 18 months of selling their business. And so why, you know, back up, why is that? And it's usually because they haven't done the work in all these different areas.
Yeah, and for us, if we're creating a strategy just based on purely dollars at the end of the day, first of all, we're probably not your person to help you think through that, because that is just, I mean, that's as sterile gets from a transaction perspective, right? I mean, that's just, hey, get your stuff out there, see what happens, hope it works out. You and I both know the people we deal with every day, business owners that we deal with every day, it's much more than that. It is emotional. It is that I've had this business and I may think twice about this as it evolves because I've never done it. Okay, so let's get prepared for that. Let's understand what that takes. And so, you know, look, I can't answer the question without knowing the right set of facts, and those set of facts may evolve as we go through the course of the discussion as well.
100%.
Most people
they need
don't
to evolve.
Know that, correct?
Yeah.
And so it's very easy for us to have the conversation, ask the hard questions, because if you haven't thought about that yet, well, then our conversation is going to shift and evolve with it, right?
Yep.
And so I just think it's important for people to understand it's okay not to know, but we at least have to kind of think about it and understand it, because if you're just saying, I want to sell my business to get the most money, I promise you there's going to be some challenges with that once you do that.
So I'm going to now pivot because it's a great answer. So my next question is going to be, Scott and I had the opportunity recently to sit with a gentleman, late 70s, phenomenal business for over 50 years. Yep. And I have to believe he's thought about exiting his business, but he's literally never done any execution and planning until he is now 77. You got 2 minutes. I'm 45 years old. Why is the statement, build a business with the end or exit in mind, smart?
It's smart because if you know ultimately where you want to get to, you got to know what to push and pull to get there. And most business owners don't build a business without a plan anyway, right? And I tell them it's the same thing. If you're building a business, and take this 70-year-old, for example, my guess is he had some strategic thoughts on where he wanted to get to from an operational perspective. Mm-hmm. Well, wouldn't you do the same thing from a liquidity or exit planning or transaction perspective? No doubt. And so that 70-year-old, he may get to the point where he says, well, look, I'm here. His catalyst may be different than the 45-year-old. And in fact, I would tell you it's going to be most 9 times out of 10.
And I think part of is sometimes I think that 40-year-old doesn't realize they need that catalyst at that age.
They think they have time.
They think they have time. And I guess the phrase that comes to mind, if I build my business with the end in mind, sure, it doesn't mean you have to sell it in 18 months.
Yep.
There's an old saying, maybe this is where you're going, is that if you don't sell your business, you bought it.
That's right.
Right? Like if you don't sell it to someone else today, then you bought it today. So you
good, but unpack that.
You might as well create the most value that you can.
Sure.
And part of how you create value is paying attention to these things that would ultimately create value in an exit. But if you're not out there selling it today, then you bought it. Yep. You own it. It's yours. You bought it.
You're reinvesting in it. And look, it's like people or equipment or anything else. if you're not reinvesting in the business or your people or your equipment, guess what? Over the course of time, you've deferred that and it's not going to be good for you. Right? That's no bueno. I mean, that's not going to turn out okay. So you want to keep reinvesting. And so I tell business owners, whether you do something today or 10 years from now, as a business owner, you consume information and data to put you in the best position to succeed. This is no different. Have the intelligence to know where to go and how to get there. And then ultimately, if that callus is there, perfect, you're ready. And if not, no problem. You've created a better business and gotten better yourself.
So let's talk about process for a second. So one of the things I love about Western is, and have really appreciated this about you guys, is that unlike a lot of banking firms, you don't charge a retainer up front, right? So, typical scenario,
that's huge.
You engage the business owner, you charge them whatever, 10 grand a month for however long to get into the process. And you guys just say, look, we're going to come alongside you. We're going to work with you. We're going to figure it out. And then at the end of the day, when you transact, that's when we're going to get paid. And so you invest a lot of time, and then through time, money in the relationship long before there's any compensation back to you guys. So what's the process that you go through to sort of determine who we're going to invest time in and who we're going to sort of maybe wait for another day till they're a little further along?
That's a great question.
And this goes back to handicapping situations and understanding what the business owner wants, right? And what I tell people is, look, my job and my career path has finance, accounting, tax, legal, organizational management, every facet of business there is. But more importantly, we touched on this earlier, it is also emotional. And then even probably more so, it's managing expectations. And so that process looks like, because we're success-based driven, we're going to take the risk with you. No problem. Happy to do it. That's how you develop these, whether it's a year or 10 years from now. But we're also going to have the hard conversation. And so very often we've had conversations where someone says, hey, I want 100 million. But when we look at the business and we look at the cash flow and we see EBITDA and we see where things are, it may be worth 50, 75. And we have to have that conversation with them. And if they say, well, no, got to have 100 because my buddy did this and I know he sold for that, no problem. Here's how an investor looks at it based on economics and return. And no one just throws money at things. They have to have a disciplined approach. So if you can't get comfortable with this, then we just need to move on or get your business prepared to how to then go get the 100. Okay. And that's a lot of times how it works.
So the first piece, realistic expectations.
100%.
Those have to be in line.
And having that hard conversation to drop that bomb, which is probably a bomb.
And then you said the second thing is, then we got to go to work on all the stuff, right? Yep. So talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Because you listed off a number of things that, areas where you work, but talk about how you guys think from a process-driven perspective, how you work through each of these different silos.
So let's say we meet a business owner. Doug, you own a business. Okay. And let's just say it's an industrial business or manufacturing business, okay? $10 million of EBITDA. So you've built a great business. It's a good size. And at some point you want to do something. The first part of the process is what we've already talked about. As a 45-year-old or even 57-year-old, doesn't matter. When you hear M&A or selling your business, most people gravitate to, well, that means I'm selling 100%. They're going to mess things up. My people are going to get fired. Well, the reality is that's just not the case. In fact, most of the transactions we do are what we call recaps. You're going to sell a portion of your business, continue to own it, operate it, run it, and then ultimately over the course of time, maybe even sell it again and have another liquidity event. So bifurcating those two things is the first part, right? That's the emotional piece. Where does the business owner sit? What do we want to do? From there, we then get to kind of the evolution or the valuation piece, right? Valuation. We get financials of the business. Sometimes they're audited, sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's QuickBooks, sometimes it's a full ERP system. I mean, you would be shocked or maybe you wouldn't. Every business is different.
Yep.
So then we go through that. Then we try to understand, at the end of the day, everyone talks about EBITDA. And the first question I always get is, what's my multiple on my business? I don't know, buddy. I got to understand your business. And most business buyers, investors, family offices, private equity strategics, when we go through and look at your business, they don't think about it in terms of a multiple. They think about it as, what can I pay today based on the cash flow generated to then yield a certain return? And then at that point, you apply the multiple. So then we educate the business owner. What does that mean? Let's get the financials. Let's understand how revenue builds. Is it contracted? Is it sticky? Is it just one time? Is it purchase orders? Do you have visibility? Do you not? You try to understand that piece. Then you kind of go to the gross profit and you understand unit economics. Is it variable? How does that scale? Can I scale it? Am I stuck? Am I have pricing benefit because of steel or some other commodity? Like, who knows? There's all kinds of mechanisms to see gross profit. Then you look at SG&A. Am I steady? Am I not? Can I leverage that? Do I have all the components I need? Do I need another management, filled here? Do I have the real estate I need? You look at the business. That's going to produce an EBITDA. But really what we're trying to get to is cash flow. Then you have working capital. How quick do I get paid? Do I get paid early? How quick do I pay my suppliers? Where does my cash flow move to then basically move my EBITDA and then CapEx? What do I need to do to reinvest back in the business? Some are equipment heavy and have a lot of CapEx, some are not. All of that, and of course taxes we talk about, but that's a whole different deal depending on structure, creates cash flow. Well, at the end of the day, no matter what kind of business it is, EBITDA and cash flow, those are the dichotomies of what you have to look at to see how sticky is that business. And so then we have that discussion with the business owner, say, here's what generates your cash flow. Here are the levers fundamentally that dictate that, both macro from an environmental level, industrial or industry, and or your specific micro business. And then we have that conversation and we try to think through, okay, how can this business grow organically, inorganically with the partner, or everything in between? And then that helps us get to a point where we can tell them what that business is worth based on a set of potential partners that we deem as appropriate based on what he tells us he wants to do and the return profile, because not every investor underwrites to the same return. Some family office could have a 7% return, some could have a 20% return. Just depends.
So let's talk about EBITDA for a second.
Okay.
So,
don't ask me what it stands for.
I won't ask, but
look it up.
It's so then you get to your EBITDA number, right?
Yep.
But then there is adjusted EBITDA.
Correct. Good.
There's
point.
run rate EBITDA.
Yep.
There's EBITDA, right? Like, so how do you guys counsel the business owner in terms of how to think about those different ways to calculate EBITDA?
Yeah. And so this is great because I smile at this question because depending on what side of the table I'm sitting on is what I'm trying to isolate, right?
For sure. As the banker, you want that number to be as big as you can.
If I'm selling a business, I want adjusted or pro forma EBITDA to be high, but for us, this is where it's different. I don't need the bullshit of it's going to get retraded down the road. Because we're success-based, I don't want surprises, right? I am managing expectations throughout the course of this process. So I am doing my utmost best job to get to the right number. The higher it is, sure, that's naturally better, but I need it to be right. Because if it just gets negotiated down, that doesn't do me any good.
Right.
Because I've set expectations.
Correct.
So I need to manage those expectations.
That's good.
As the buyer, okay, and we buy businesses for private equity groups, public companies, or even ourselves. We principally own some businesses ourselves. As a buyer, okay, I'm going to hone in on adjusted EBITDA and see what you did and why you did it. Does it make sense? Does it not? In any given business, you're going to have a whole host of, I'm going to call it adjustments that are real and that are not real. Some are pro forma, meaning, hey, this would happen in this kind of environment going forward. Some are pretty specific. Hey, the business owner lives out of the business, and so this is not going to happen going forward. Okay, no problem.
Yep.
And it's somewhere in between, but we do our best to understand it. And when we put something out, we're going to make sure it's real because, again, I don't need it to get
You've already set the
out.
expectation of the business owner for a number and a multiple, and you don't want that.
Because, Doug, if I tell you, hey, this business is worth $100 million, and let's just say it's a $10 million EBITDA business, so that implies a 10 times deal, which may or may not work for any kind of business. But then I get in there and we realize 10 is really 6. Well, I'm not getting you 100.
Yeah.
And if I don't get you 100, which you've kind of now committed to,
right,
and I'm success-based, well, now I've just,
and likely if the business owner hears 100,
correct,
they've already gone out and spent some of that 100.
100%.
Not physically, but emotionally, they're thinking about house in Colorado, correct, or whatever their thing is. They've already begun to spend some of that.
And this is where our structure is important because we're building the relationship. Headline price is what everybody focuses on. Same with multiple. But the reality is, depending on a C Corp, S Corp type of structure, there's taxes associated with this.
Right.
And
what are you going to net out of that?
And one of the questions I asked,
so you got to do that up front too. Remember, Doug, $100 million is actually not going to be $100 million wired to your bank.
And I may ask a business owner, is your $100 million headline price or after tax?
Yes.
Because if it's after tax, well, then that means we really got to go get like 135, depending on the cash debt profile. And if at 135 you're only doing 10 million of EBITDA, well, that multiple doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
And I need to have that conversation with the business owner. So it's part of that.
So one more question on EBITDA, and then we'll move on. But quality of earnings.
Yep.
So you get your EBITDA, there's an adjusted EBITDA, there's a run rate EBITDA, but then there's a quality of earnings assessment that comes in as part of the diligence process.
That's right.
Talk about how quality of earnings works, maybe define that for our audience a little bit, and then talk about just these different ways to calculate EBITDA, and then how the quality of earnings project as part of the process intersects with these different ways to measure EBITDA.
So whenever you sell a business, it's our job as the advisor to put forth what we talked about as best case EBITDA. And that could be reported EBITDA is just exactly what comes out of the system. Adjusted EBITDA is the difference between if somebody else owned it and or certain expenses were not part of it. And then really pro forma, and there's different nomenclature for all this, but let's just assume this is kind of standard. Then from adjusted EBITDA to pro forma EBITDA is things that may not necessarily be in the business today, but we know if we did it this way, that's what you're going to get as buyer. So you're going to get the credit for that. We want to get some value for that opportunity. Okay. So then a buyer's going to look at pro forma EBITDA, and let's say that equates to the 10 million. And he's going to pay you $100 million off of that. Well, during the process, once we go exclusive, and this is typically post LOI because there's a whole kind of pattern of getting the buyer interested or the partner interested to even do this, they're going to hire they're going to hire an accounting firm. Could be Big Four, could be a regional, could be a local guy to do a quality of earnings. And what that means is this accounting group is going to go through your GL and your trial balances and basically try to confirm or deny that pro forma adjusted EBITDA. And for a lot of times, that's a big deal for a privately owned business. Why? Because they're internal. They may or may not get an audit. They may or may not do revenue recognition correctly. They may or may not do accruals correctly. They may just expense things when they get it. For construction companies, they may do POC, they may not. You have to get the things in the right bucket. And this is what I was laughing about. Like, I hated accounting originally, and now it seems like it's just what you do.
It's essential.
It is, and it's the language of business.
Because it's
no
the black
matter
and white.
What you do.
Yeah, this is what this business produces or does not.
Correct. And so that quality of earnings is there to then basically give buyer comfort with cash flow. Is what they told you correct? Now, we go in ahead of time and we feel pretty comfortable with our knowledge and skill set. We get to that similar thought process.
Right.
But they're going to do their own work.
So a good banker, a good advisor is going to make sure that whatever that pro forma adjusted EBITDA number is going to match up to that quality of earnings. There's not going to be any
100%.
surprises.
And look,
So if you're representing, let me just back this up and say, so as Western, if you're advising me, the owner of the company, you're going to do that work on the front end.
Correct.
So when the potential buyer does it, you're trying to mitigate surprises.
That's right. And so, look, it depends on the complexities of the business, the protocols, the controls, and what they've done.
Right.
I mean, if it's just a cash-based business on general ledger, I mean, we're going to have to maybe get some help to get the controls in place. But aside from that, we feel confident that we're going to know what we're looking for and how to do it. Now, there are some advisors who will just say, hey, you need to go spend $50,000, get a sell-side QV, because either they don't want the risk or they just don't want to do all that. And that's fine too, but the idea that if you get a sell-side QV and the buyer is just going to take that as gospel, that doesn't exist. Just doesn't exist.
The buyer's going to do their own work.
They're going to do their own work.
So I want to go here for a second. And one of the things I appreciate about you already is you do realize every deal is unique.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask you to break some of that.
Okay.
On a 80% rule, what's the most common conversation or thing you say to a business owner? Doug, you're going to need to do more or less of this in your business. You know what I'm trying to get to?
I do. And I think...
Is it typically people? Is it operation? What does that most common thing, I own a business, 10 million EBITDA, so I think, what are you telling me most of the time?
Yeah, and if you think about what we deal with, most of the business we deal with are 5 to 20 million of EBITDA.
Okay.
And we've sold 50s and we've sold smaller and we buy larger, but I mean, just say that's kind of
so, and you're all sweet spot.
Yeah, just say that's right. Surprisingly, most business owners from a financial control perspective is where we see most of the hiccups because they've operated their business, and usually they're not CPAs or CFOs by trade. They're operational guys, right? And so they've known how to bring revenue in the door, operate it, give a good quality product or service or situation. They may have bank financing, which may require some sort of, output. They may have bonding, which maybe requires some output. But for the most part, they're managing their business the way they know how. And that's not to necessarily sell the business.
Correct.
And that's not necessarily talk to private equity group or institutional investor. So where we spend a lot of our time is getting that language to be apples to apples with how these people think about it.
Well, the other nuance here is that, a lot of business owners run a lot of personal stuff
100%.
through their business, which is, there's nothing wrong with that.
Correct.
But it's problematic when it's time to go,
That's right.
to go offer the business to a buyer, because now all of a sudden you got, maybe the country club or cars or phones or meals and entertainment and trips.
And we spend a lot of time
trying to
understanding that and breaking that out so we can show true EBITDA cash flow.
Okay, so that's Doug. I own this manufacturing business.
Yep.
I'm doing that. What are those 1, 2, or 3 pragmatic things you're telling me to go do in the next 90 days?
Okay, so we're going to look at your controls, right? We're going to look at your financials, and we're going to study month-to-month
So I'm going
swings.
to hand you my QuickBook, so to speak.
So
Or-
ideally, you either give us the output or we even get the backups to QuickBook, and we're just in it because
Okay, yep.
our job is to take the
You're an
burden
accountant
away
again.
from you.
Yep,
Exactly.
yep.
Yeah, I'm like, man, what am I doing
Yep.
right with QuickBooks? But
this
it
is
makes
the reason
it
why
easier.
everybody starts at an analyst.
Seriously.
He or she starts there. You're determining whether business is valuable or not right there, probably.
Yeah, and you're understanding
Or
the
one
nuance
level.
of each business,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
So in a manufacturing business, I'm going to be focused on my inventory, right? And how that inventory plays and working capital. And so I'm going to tell you, business owner, make sure your controls and your financials are in place. That may require an audit down the road. It may not, a financial audit. It's a nice to have. You don't have to have it every time, but it is a nice to have. But it's, okay, revenue recognition, inventory control, working capital control, and then how lumpy is your business? And is it lumpy because you just place stuff when you want to, or is it reality of how accruals and revenue recognition should work? That's kind of, for most businesses, 1A.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to, do you have contracts? Are they actually executed? What do purchase orders look like? How's your workforce? I mean, as you can appreciate in Texas in construction, I mean, you got compliance issues with immigration. You got to make sure that's done correctly. You have FLSA, which is how you pay people. Are you paying overtime? Are you paying piece rate? How are you doing that? These are all the things that a savvy buyer is going to come look at and identify exposure points that they don't want to take risk on. So it's our job to get it right.
So let's pause for a second there. What's the ideal timeline? I mean,
That's
and
great.
again, back
That's
to
great.
Doug's sort of framing, like recognizing that every business owner's journey and pathway is going to be unique. But like in an ideal scenario, you meet the business owner entrepreneur and they say, I want to exit this business, and you say, well, I need how much time? Like, what's sort of the desired
That's a
amount
great
of
question.
time to start to do all the work to be at a place when you exit that maximum value can be
So I'll
realized?
give you a real life example of someone that
Love it.
happened just like this, right? Okay, so introduction happens. We meet him. He is, let's say, early 60s, okay? But he knows what he wants to do. He just doesn't know how to do it. We start talking. Business is trending in the right way. Great business. And we say, okay, let's just have a couple meetings together to make sure, hey, you want to work with me and I want to work with you, because at the end of the day, this is intimate.
Yep.
And I may be on the phone every night at 9 o'clock or 5 times a day with these business owners, working through the emotions and the strategy and the tactical piece of everything. So that relationship has to be there, right? I think that's first most important. It's you got to want to do business with this advisor.
Yep.
Secondarily, it's okay, you meet, takes a couple months to get information, to have that first meeting of, this is what we think it's worth. Here's what it looks like after taxes. Here's kind of a potential buyer pool based on what you told me, and we have an interactive dialogue. That should happen within the first month or 2 months, okay? Assuming we say go together and, we get engaged and we do all that, side of it, the typical sell side opportunity takes anywhere from 5 to 8 months, I would say. Some have taken longer, some have been miraculously shorter, but for the most part, I tell people on average, it's a 6 to 8 month process, because you have to get there. Now, I use process kind of loosely,
Sure,
because we're not doing it that way. I mean, we're very much a rifle. We want to do it right. It's customized. And I came from a world where it was a broad auction, send it to 200 people, hope it works out and see what happens. That works for some.
right.
Most of the business owners we deal with don't want that.
Yeah, it's not your strategy.
Correct.
So let me ask the question in a different way. So we want to exit. We're, business owner, I want to exit, but my business is really not ready for exit.
Sure.
Okay. And you meet him, you like this guy. great business, but things are kind of a mess.
Yep.
Now, how much time do you need? 5 to 8 months?
Scott, that could be 6 months. That could be 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, and I know that's kind of a broad range, but it really, I mean, I've sold businesses that we cultivated the relationship for literally 5 years because emotionally he wasn't ready, but also the business wasn't ready.
Right.
And so you got to go through these things to get them there.
So let's ask the same question again. We have a business owner, he or she they're ready, they want to exit, but their business is a mess.
Yep.
And so, the 5 to 8 months, shiny up, put some lipstick on the pig doesn't really work. There's real work that has to be done inside the business to get them prepared. What's the timeline for that scenario?
And so and again, I feel like I'm hedging on some of this. I'd further bifurcate. If the business is a mess because of financials and controls and organizational thought process, okay, 6 months, it doesn't take as long because you can administratively get that going.
You can go clean that up much easily.
And accounting, you can put process and controls in. If it's a mess because of the business performance and operations,
maybe culturally,
then those two are a lot longer. And the reason they're a lot longer is because I'm not going to go transact or try to find a potential partner for X business owner, he or she, if we're not on the right trend, right? Because that probably isn't the right outcome for you given the way people think about value. And you don't want to buy an asset that's depreciating. You want to buy one that's exciting and growing and et cetera.
So how much time, like it's super clear to me in this conversation that you spend a ton of time on the financials and on that piece of it. And that, arguably that's the most important thing at the end of the day. That's what's going to drive valuation and that's going to drive net proceeds. But, one of our pillars of PTP or pre-transaction planning is this other component on the business side. So there's valuation and then there's this, you could call it administration, you could call it organization, you could call it culture, you could call it managing, call it a lot of different things, but it's sort of almost the touchy-feely stuff that needs to be, you want to, to maximize value, it's great to be able to say we don't have any turnover or we have low turnover and we have low turnover because we have a great culture and we have a great management team. And when I step away, I got this great group of next generation leaders that are going to be able to step into all these roles. How much work do you guys at Western do on what I'd call the soft issues or this other pillar?
Great question.
A lot. And what people don't appreciate is they gravitate towards the financials because that's kind of what everyone thinks first blush.
It's the easy
what's
part.
the multiple?
Right.
Boom. The reality is, if you want to get the value that most people view for their business as what it's worth, you got to have all the other stuff. If I'm a business owner and I don't have anyone to back me up and I'm selling, well, that's not as valuable as a business as one that has a succession plan. It has the lineage. It has the lieutenants underneath it to grow. If I got a business that, man, I got customers, but they leave me every day and I'm not working to get them contracts or I'm not, showing how this is sticky. That's a whole nother thing.
Or the business owner is the key rainmaker.
Correct. We look at customer concentration. How much is one customer? Okay. Well, who has that relationship? Okay, no problem, right? Vendors, how much is one vendor? Well, what is that relationship? What are the contracts associated with that? How much CapEx is in this business? How much do you have to reinvest into the business to keep it going? There's so many other things that matter.
So back to that earlier question with the business owner, they have some work to do. There's more going on. How does Western practically sort of execute on those things? Like to me, the financial piece, very straightforward. It's almost clinical. But, culture, leadership team, concentration of customers, business owners, a key rainmaker. How do you guys work with the business owner on those other softer issues?
This goes back to the hard conversations, right? We got no problem saying, hey, in order to go get where we all want to get to, these are the things you have to do. If it's culture related and we identify that, well, so is a sophisticated partner or buyer. So we need to get that right. Well, that's not easy to do.
Right.
We all know that.
That could take years.
100%. And it's got to take a willing business owner that has to agree with you in the first place.
And do the work.
Do the work. So it's not like there's a magic wand that we can say, and boom, we got culture. It's multiple conversations to get them emotionally prepared for that. Well, what does that look like? And look, at the end of the day, as much as I keep saying this, the financial piece, but we're a sounding board, right? We are there for business owners so that they can understand, okay, well, how do I do that? Well, I don't know that we can just execute that for them, but we put them in the right position or let them talk to some of our other networks so that they can understand how other people did that.
That's right. That's one of the things that we've tried to identify at True North is to say, help the business owner uncover some of those things. And if it's culture or whatever it is, we're not necessarily going to be the guys that are going to go install a new culture for you, but maybe we have a resource or a relationship or a coach or an implementer that can help walk through a process and, you know, kind of get you down the path and get you working on it.
Like every business, like every deal, every transaction, every evolution, it's solving problems, right? And I've kind of just gotten comfortable over the last 17 years of being uncomfortable because there's something always going on. You just deal with it.
Just assume it's there and figure it out.
No deal's easy. And people are like, oh, well, the 10 million's got to be a lot easier than the 500.
Well,
like,
I'm sure
all hard.
It's like any distribution. 10% are incredibly easy, 10% are incredibly difficult, and everything else is just pretty difficult.
Well, I've lived my life over here because I've never found these.
And let's be real. When we talk about culture, every single company has a culture.
For sure.
Right? It's either positive or negative.
Yeah.
So what is your, what is your go-to 1, 2, 3 if you've had the hard conversation. Doug, you got 10 million EBITDA. Your culture is not positive. Generally, what are you telling me in that hard conversation I need to do?
Yeah, I think we need to identify that together. Hey, Doug, if your culture isn't there, well, then think about bringing in somebody else. That's not going to work very well, right? Because you've instilled this thought process either, and look, the culture is not there for any number of reasons. It may be that this rainmaker just is micromanaging and you can't do it and has to do it all. And so people haven't been able to flourish. Well, that's a problem if new partner comes in. Or secondarily, new partner or business owner doesn't want to absorb that kind of just negativity. May be a little bit kind of aggressive, but you know what I mean? Like they don't,
I do.
They want to step in.
If
someone's going to pay you $100 million or 50 or 5 or 500, they want to make sure that's humming to the best of its ability. Now, there may be opportunities for them to come in and do things, you know, from a revenue perspective or something else, but like the culture piece has to be there because you're talking about a going concern. Right. This business should be bigger than any one person. And
because the multiples are paid
on
future earnings.
Correct. Because otherwise a business owner is not going to come in here and say, hey, we're going to pay you because we know this is going to be a piece of shit later. Why would anybody do that?
Right.
Sorry.
They're not. No, don't be sorry. Nobody wants to own that kind of a business. George, thank you for your time. Man, I feel like we've scratched the surface. If you own a business, there's a lot to probably be done.
Sure.
Start early. Everything you do today probably pays dividends in the future.
Sure.
Thank you for joining us on Decision Points.